Hello again and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd. We're so happy you could join us for another hour of answering your gardening questions. Although we haven't been able to take any phone calls this year, you've kept us very busy by sending in your emails and pictures. We've still got a few shows left, so if you'd like to get those questions in, send us an email, byf@unl.edu. We do need to know where you live. Try to give us as much detail as you can about that question and a good picture or two so we can answer it better. Unfortunately, we can't answer everybody's question on the air. You can always search for those answers on our social media pages, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And we start with samples. From here, it looks like a glass block, so I assume there's something in there you don't want to get out.
Yeah, I bought this box of chocolates for this box to put this spider in. So this is a black widow spider, and we're celebrating our year anniversary. So someone actually dropped this off to the office last year, September, and it was found in the grapes at a grocery store, which is pretty common, it seems. So I looked that up. So always check your grapes when you bring them home, but it's not common to find them in the home. You can find them outside in like outbuildings, in leaf litter, things like that. But the black widow is known for eating its mate, but this one has not mated and it has not laid an egg case. I expect it to live for another year maybe. I've been very good to it. People always want to know if it's dangerous. And the black widow is one of the 2 spiders that do have medically important venom. So if you do get bitten, you do want to go to a doctor because all spiders have venom. So they're not poisonous, they're venomous. And their venom is a neurotoxin. But spiders do not bite people unless they feel threatened, if they're getting crushed. They're in a boot or something and you put your foot in there or pressed up against the body. They don't need a blood meal, so I don't want to alarm people. But you can see she's got a big bulbous abdomen, and if you look very closely, I don't know if the camera can get it, on the underside is where that red hourglass is. I don't think she'll spin around, but a lot of times people think it's on the back. It is on the underside. And she's not as scary. She's pretty shiny. So this is my friend.
I do think I'm going to inspect my grapes.
Inspect your grapes.
Wow.
And yeah, I was lucky that she didn't call the news and she brought it to me. And
that's excellent. Yeah, thanks, Jody. All right, we've been harvesting, Kyle.
Yeah, I was actually almost late for the show because I've got
again.
There's too many fun things to dig up on campus, and so yeah, after the rains that we had last week, was it? We are starting to see some more mushrooms popping up as well, especially, and so we do have some of our cooler season mushrooms that are loving this time of year. And so I brought just a couple of specimens. And so the first one that I'll talk about is I got these underneath the walnut. These are in the genus Phyliata. Typically, mushrooms in this genus are typically will have these kind of shaggy caps. And then the other thing that these mushrooms often have is the cap kind of folds underneath, and so it kind of folds under like that. But the other thing that I wanted to mention with these mushrooms is we'll often talk about mushrooms kind of being like an iceberg, and where we're only seeing the top of the iceberg. And if you dig down far enough, you will eventually find the woody tissue that the mushroom is growing on. I guess I removed it here, but the other mushrooms that I brought, some Inky Caps. Here we actually have one that is still attached to the piece of wood. So Inky Caps are another one that are really common this time of year. I had found these underneath the maple tree here on campus, and these are in the genus Coprinus. And there's quite a few different mushrooms in this genus. But one thing that they tend to have in common is their gills get inky. And so as they are, I had to collect some old ones, and as you can see, I just kind of, can we zoom in there? But this is some mushroom ink. So historically, these mushrooms have been used for ink and quills and things like that, if you'd want to. But what that ink is actually just the spore mass, and so the gills liquefy, and that allows the spores to spread much more readily. Now, again, people are always going to wonder, are these edible? And these mushrooms, the foliata ones, these are not edible. So really, there's nothing edible in this genus. It used to be that some people, especially in Europe, would eat these, but they have been linked to some certain kidney ailments. So please avoid these. And as far as the ink caps go, honestly, I don't really know why you'd want to eat a mushroom that's kind of liquefying. It's just it just kind of falls apart and will turn your fingers black and stuff like that. But there are actually some pretty tasty mushrooms that, in this genus. The Shaggy Mane mushroom is one that is edible, and in the same genus. But as always, if you are out foraging for mushrooms, you need to be 100% positive that you know exactly what it is before you eat it. A lot of these mushrooms can look very similar, and unless we actually look at them underneath the microscope to see the spores, it can be very difficult to tell them apart. But yeah, with all the recent rains we've had, some great cool weather mushrooms are popping
Excellent.
up.
I think the Inky Caps, if you eat them, that's perfect for Halloween.
Ooh, good idea.
Tickle your teeth. All right, John.
Well, I always tell people all mushrooms are edible. Some are only edible once.
Once.
Right. So
You brought something that's a green tomato.
I brought a green tomato. Why did I bring a green tomato? Well, you might have noticed that the weather is changing. So we sort of suddenly went into fall weather. The evenings are cool, even if the days are still warm and pleasant. And so we have a lot of green tomatoes still left out on the plant. And likely that they're not going to ripen or continue ripening very much. So what are you going to do with all these tomatoes? So you can leave them on the vine and see if they will ripen, sort of like hoping for some sort of miracle to occur. It is still possible if we get some warm weather. But you can also harvest some of them when it gets closer. You can actually take them inside and ripen them. Tomatoes are a class of fruit we call climacteric fruits, meaning that they ripen after they've been picked. Some fruits are not climacteric, and so these will continue ripening. You can pick them, put them on your counter, let them ripen. The one caveat is that the earlier you pick them, the less sugars are going to develop, and so they won't be as tasty as a, quote, vine-ripened tomato. You can also slice them up and dredge them in a little flour, egg, and cornmeal and have fried green tomatoes, and you can use those up that way. Back where I'm from in West Virginia, you go to the Greenbrier Resort, and they're famous for their fried green tomato BLT sandwich. Mm-hmm.
I've had that before.
You've had that before, yes, you have. And you can also, most people don't realize, since these are much harder than a regular tomato, you can actually prepare fried green tomatoes and not cook them and actually put them in the freezer, like put them on a single layer on a baking dish, set them in the freezer, freeze them, take them out, put them in a Ziploc bag, and you can pull them out and fry them whenever you want them through the winter.
Excellent. Thank you all. All right, you ready, Jody? You've got two from the same viewer. This is Columbus, Nebraska first. He walked past these prickly pears and noticed this white milky substance. He wonders what this is. It looks like the patch is dying off. What is this?
Yeah, those are cochineal scales, and their host is these prickly pear cacti. So if you were actually to take one and squish it, it would be red. They actually use that as like a natural dye, but it's a scale insect. So that white fuzzy stuff is wax, and that covers the females and the eggs. The way they get around is through the crawler stage with a lot of the scale insects we have in other plants. And then the males actually have wings, and so they are actually mobile.
Yeah,
but that's what those are.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, but if they're not his, he doesn't have to treat them. But if you do have cacti and you want to treat them, spray them first with the hose, spray it so that the scales are visible, and then treat with insecticidal soap.
Excellent. All right, your next one is a Coneflower and Black-Eyed Susan Snipper. Beautiful season of blooms. They don't have rabbits. There's nothing, so we think this is our little
Yeah,
insect.
the sunflower head clipper weevil. So it's a little beetle that probably like an inch under where the flower head is. It chews all the way around, and then the heads is where it'll lay its eggs, and then the larvae develop. So I don't see any like hanging heads, but if you can find those flower heads, I would take those and destroy them, because that is where the larvae is developing. So that is the control or management tactic for next year, so you don't have this problem again.
All right, and don't throw them in the compost.
No.
If there was a rabbit that was eating the heads off of those flowers, I'd hate to run into that rabbit
That's
in the middle of the night.
I know, I was like, that's a big rabbit.
Yeah, duck and cover. Right. All right, and your next one, Jody, is this is a Lamar's, Iowa viewer who wondered, these are about 3 to 4 inch long
Oh
caterpillars.
yeah, these are pretty. And I've had a couple of these sent to me this week, and these are Leafy Spurge hawk moths is what they'll turn into. So a big moth that's kind of like a brownish green, and if you look at the hind wings, they'll be pink, and on the underside it's pink. So most people want to know if it's a pest. I think Spurge is mostly weedy. So unless you really love your Spurge, I let it be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Okay, Kyle. The first ones come to us from O'Neill, from a beloved friend of ours.
Yeah,
And, she grows giant pumpkins.
They may have even been on the show last year talking about them.
Perhaps. So she's grown pumpkins in this area for a few years. No other plants with herbicide injury. She does minimal cleaning between plants. She's surrounded by cornfields. So what is going on? I think we have 3 pictures of this.
Yep. So yeah, we've got some really warty pumpkins, and then some very distorted leaves. And so with our cucurbits, sometimes those warts are caused by abiotic conditions, physiological things. But when we have leaves like this is a sure sign that we're dealing with one of our many viruses. My suspicion is that it's squash mosaic virus. And the fun thing about squash mosaic virus is it is spread by the spotted cucumber beetle, and the spotted cucumber beetle is the adult of the southern corn rootworm, which is a pretty major pest in agronomic fields. And so if you are growing cucurbits close to cornfields, you do have a higher likelihood of dealing with some of these viral diseases. And really, I think that's what's going on here. And so we do have the leaf distortion, and then also will kind of cause those knobs on the pumpkin themselves. Control can be very tough. We can try to control the vector, but that's going to be fairly difficult. So the best thing that you can do is just sanitation. So making sure that you are cleaning your cutting shears between pumpkins. And if you are dealing with giant pumpkins, you're doing a lot of pruning and a lot of babying, and so it is very easy to spread these viruses from plant to plant.
Will this return next year?
So the virus will remain in the soil, so it can overwinter in. There are some weedy hosts that it can overwinter in, or if just in the infested plant material. So next year, can try growing pumpkins in the same area, but making sure that we're cleaning those shears between cuts probably be the best thing.
All right, thanks, Kyle. All right, your next one is actually this is someone who has pears. She has a Parker and a Summer Crisp. They both bloomed and put on fruit. The Summer Crisp suddenly didn't have any fruit. The Parker did well, had quite a few fruits, but they've had so many of the pears with this weird brown peel and partially brown. What's going on?
So I think this is black rot, what we're dealing with, also known as bot rot. It's caused by a fungal pathogen, Botryosphaeria obtusa is the name of it. And that would also kind of explain why. So this is the symptoms that we see on mature pears. It's kind of these larger black blotches that can occur really anywhere on the pear. But this fungus can also get into the flowers and can actually cause issues very early in fruit development. So that could be the reason why you weren't seeing any pears on the other tree. Control for this one, you know, if it was a production field, they'd probably be thinking about some sort of fungicide application, the fungicide that contains strobilurin, such as Captan. But generally, with homeowner situations, sanitation is going to be the best thing. So making sure that we are picking up any pears that have fallen to the ground that have those blotches on them. And this fungus also, it overwinters as a canker on the branches too. So if you are seeing cankered branches, prune those out, and hopefully next year you won't have to deal with bot rot.
Bot rot, I like it. Okay. John, this is a tomato question. This is a celebrity. They're not ripening evenly. They're very bitter. The sweet 100s are also bitter. She covered them. She did all sorts of things about them. They're yellowish green when she cuts them open, and this is Grand Island.
Yeah, so I'm going to think, so this is going to be a common answer throughout the evening for a lot of things that I've got. I think this is going to be weather related. Mm-hmm. I think the bitterness, especially with that hot weather that we had, that's a common symptom of heat. I also think, you know, we can get uneven ripening with heat. We can also get uneven pollination. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe there could be some lack of pollination on that side of the flower that produced that side of the fruit. So I think it's weather related.
All right, and then you have yet another one, a couple of pictures of this next tomato. They look fine on the outside. Then on the inside, and these are peeled, and they're looking like this. They're this watery sort of yellowish thing. The plants look okay, so it's not a big, you know, it's not a Kyle question on the outside.
Right. I think, again, will probably be a weather thing. It could also be a genetic thing. Like, you know, some cultivars are different on the outside and on the inside. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, there's a few things that could be going on. But once again, I think it's just the weather has been so crazy this year that we've got a lot of stuff going on.
All right. Now you have a zucchini, and this is Seward. Strange bumps on the zucchini. They've picked others from the same plant that were fine.
So we have a little deja vu going on, I think. Mm-hmm. I think this is that virus that Kyle just talked about.
Yeah.
Because most people don't realize, you know, you see a zucchini, it's green, it's long. You see a pumpkin, it's round and orange and big. They're actually the same exact species. They're the same plant. Mm-hmm. And you can actually, you know, weird things happen like cross-pollination, and you can get something like a puccini, you know. And a pumpkini, you know, whatever you want to call it. So I think this is that virus. So a lot, you know. So ditto what Kyle said.
Yeah.
Ditto. All right. That's a good way to answer that one. All right. So, you know, a lot of us with older trees on our properties have really had to struggle with what to do with bumpy lawns and those exposed roots spreading out over the lawn. It's a common problem. Here to help us with that is Jeff Culbertson.
One of the common questions we get on Backyard Farmer every year is what to do with tree roots. They get big, they get in the way. How do we deal with it? Do we plant around it? Do we mulch around it? So I thought I'd start off a little bit about the biology of roots on trees, what happens here. So think of roots kind of like we do our branches and leaves. So there's non-woody roots and there's woody roots. And the non-woody roots, like our leaves, absorb nutrients and air and water. And then our woody roots provide structure, much like branches do. And over time, because the majority of the roots of a tree are in the top 12 to 18 inches of the surface, so as time goes, they increase in size. And as they increase in size, they start to become more and more evident, and they kind of start erupting through the ground, and that's when we start having problems. So it's important to remember that, just like we would with the trunk and the branches, that we can damage those roots, and then it shortens the life of the tree. It puts stress and strain on the tree, and so we want to try to eliminate as much of that as possible. And a few things we can do to help deal with that situation. One of them is to, over time, increase our mulch ring around the tree. Adding 2 to 3 inches of mulch annually will help protect the roots and then also prevent you from having to work around the base of the tree. Then we can start looking at, if you want to do some planting around that, look at around the drip line area of the tree to do some of that planting. And that will help deal with the situation as far as managing that, but also help protect the tree as well. So when we're dealing with roots, we can do some pruning on roots. I suggest you contact a professional, a certified arborist here in the state, to take a look at that. But we want to make sure that we're not doing any particular damage to the roots over time. Herbicides, so many times we'll think we want to use some sort of herbicide or weed killer around trees. The chemistry of our herbicides today are pretty good. And just like spraying the trunk or the leaves of a tree that you would do damage, spraying the base of the tree, spraying around the root system could also potentially do damage. So if we have to do some vegetation clearing around there to open up the space, you know, we're going to want to use our hands, use some tools to help clean that up a little bit, or just using the mulch to help suppress that, the grass or whatever you have growing underneath there to help get rid of that area. So going forward, you know, a couple things to think about. We want to make sure that we're not working around tree roots, we're not digging in there, we're not using our mower and doing damage to the tree roots. Think about making sure we expand our mulch bed wide enough so that way we're protecting the tree area, that root system. And keep in mind that the root system can be very expansive, so beyond the drip line of the tree many times. So when working around trees, keep in mind that you may be interfering with that and in turn looking at shortening the life of the tree.
Mulch is always going to be a good answer in most of those cases, and as Jeff said, leave that pruning to the professionals. Don't go hacking away and cutting all those roots off. All right, Jody, next round we have Cedar Creek, Nebraska. Can you please help me out with what kind of beetle is this? They got busy one night and they woke up to bumps all over the sandy beach. So there's the beetle, and I think we have a picture of all the bumps. What is that?
That is really cool. That is, it's called a hairy-necked tiger beetle, but that is a great picture and of the beetle and of the habitat. So they always will nest and have burrows in sandy, beachy areas. So in some places, they need to be conserved because people are driving like UTVs over the burrows and crushing them. But those are burrows that they lay their eggs in, and then you'll see little larvae, and they're both predaceous. So I don't know, admire them, but that's what they are, hairy-necked tiger beetles.
Very cool. All right, then we have a Hupper, Nebraska viewer, who found this insect on her lantana. What is that?
Okay, this is a type of longhorn beetle, and that just means it has a very long antennae. These, as larvae, will be borers of certain plants. Oh, it's an amorpha borer. So as larvae, they bore into stems and trees. And so this one, I think, is a borer pest as a larvae in false indigo. And then as adults, they feed on nectar, and most commonly they're found on goldenrod.
All right, so bad guy for the false indigo.
Yeah, so if you've got false indigo around and there's decline, then you'll know what it is.
Okay. And then your next one is a carny viewer. Pin oak. Leaves were looking pretty rough this spring. He thought the new growth would be normal, but then he's got these holes in the strange margins. They do live on an acreage, corn within a quarter of a mile, so he didn't think about herbicide damage. And then, of course, the holes are a little bit different things. So what do we think here?
Right. So you're just part of like the really bad oak tree club, like a lot of us. This may be herbicide damage because I see those holes on a lot of the leaves. But on some of the leaves, there's a lot of, I think, like feeding up to that main vein. So I do believe some of that feeding is done by a caterpillar. I can't tell you which one because there are a lot. But so it's a combination of things. But this one actually doesn't look like it's got any of the diseases that most of the oaks have.
No, the leaves looked a lot better than a lot of them that I've been seeing.
It looks bad, but better than a lot of the oaks.
Bad but better.
Bad but better.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jody. All right, your next one, Kyle. This is Lyons, Nebraska. The majority of the peppers have these brown spots. The yellows are the worst. Green and red also have them. What are they, and can they still eat the peppers?
Yeah, so not entirely sure what these spots are. We were discussing it before the show. Originally, I was wondering about maybe anthracnose, since there are kind of some rings that are forming there, but their lesions are not sunken at all, and that's very typical with anthracnose. I almost am thinking that it does look like injury from a piercing sucking insect, potentially a stink bug or something else. Oftentimes that injury will be kind of white, but it opens up a wound, and anytime we have wounds, that's a perfect place for other secondary things to come in and cause infection. So a lot of secondary fungi, bacteria that love taking advantage of some feeding wounds. And that's my suspicion for what's going on. As far as edibility, probably. I'd want to cut it open and see what the inside is looking like first, because chances are that those lesions aren't going through to the inside, and the inside is going to be just fine. So I'd probably just cut those off and eat away.
All right, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so Clarkson, Nebraska is your next one, and what causes this on taters?
Yeah, these don't look quite as tasty. So this is one of our Fusarium dry rots on potatoes. These can be very common. This is one of the biggest diseases of potatoes, and whether it is homeowners or even commercial production fields. So this Fusarium, caused by a few different species of the Fusarium fungi, and that are found really in most soils. And infection occurs anytime there's a wound. And so wounding in potato production often occurs either at planting, where we have those cut seed ends, or during harvest. So you really want to make sure that we're not wounding those potatoes, allowing the fungus inside of it. And then this rot will get worse in storage. So as far as control goes, one of the best things that you can do is actually making sure that you're warming up the potato seeds prior to planting. So making sure that they're at about 60 degrees Fahrenheit before planting, because cold tomatoes are brittle and they crack a lot easier, allowing more infection to occur. I've seen a lot of potatoes like this, even when I buy a bag of potatoes. And you cut it open, and if you can find any part of it that's still looking good, that part is perfectly fine to eat, but I would not eat that gross, nasty end stuff.
All right. Your next one is a blue spruce, sudden needle drop from the top. Are we looking at a canker probably?
Most likely. There is another disease or kind of disease thing that is just known as spruce sudden needle drop. But typically that occurs more sporadically on branches. But anytime we're looking at something dying from the top down, I would look for some sort of injury, whether it is animal feeding or a canker that's occurred there. Unfortunately, the top part of that spruce probably won't come back. And so that is one of the hard parts.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Okay, you have a couple tree pictures, John.
Okay.
I know you just love. The first
Yes.
is a Gretna viewer. The bark is splitting a bit on this tree. She's wondering, is this okay?
So the splitting bark is probably, I would think, something going on in the winter, like we get, temperature fluctuations, and then the sun hits it and it warms up and it cracks. So that's an issue, but it's not the worst issue with this tree. So this tree is planted too deeply. And how can you tell that it's planted too deeply? It doesn't have a root flare at the bottom. So we call these telephone pole trees. So you should be able, it shouldn't look like a straight stick in the ground. It should get wider and flare out at the base. It could be actually planted at the correct depth, but now we have all this mulch piled up around it in this ring. Right. So you want to pull that mulch away from it to see, the crack may heal up, may not, but that is the depth is the worst damage. It's not going to live too long.
All right. Then you have another one here. This is a Hebron viewer, transplanted as a whip. The blocks are just there to protect it from the mower, but she started noticing these splits and cracks. They're paper thin. Is it time to call it a day and replant?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of young trees, they have very thin bark, and this is probably another one of those winter things with the temperature fluctuations. With it this bad, it's probably, you know, something to think about restarting, because that's going to be the trunk of the tree forever.
Right.
And so I would think about restarting. And you can actually do some protection in the winter, do like one of those wraps perhaps, if it's a common problem.
All right. Then we have a viewer actually in the Bohemian Alps, north of Lincoln. She got this hibiscus. She wants to move this inside. She's wondering, does it need a bigger container?
You could put it in a bigger container. The thing with container plants is that if you put it in something too large, it spends a lot of time creating roots, and so it looks like it's not thriving up top. So you don't want to put it in anything too much bigger, but up a size would be good. And you definitely want to take that in for the winter, because that is a tropical hibiscus. And so you'll want to start transitioning in and out, back and forth, and also be on the lookout for any insect friends.
All right, and your final one here is, should this little red bud be pruned now to multi-stem or single stem, or do we wait until spring?
You do want to prune it to single stem, but you want to wait until it is dormant. So don't do it now, wait until spring.
All right, excellent, thanks all. Well, you know, fall color at our garden is really an amazing sight to see. We're also doing really well with our produce and donations to those local food banks. So let's take a minute to hear from Terry James out at the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we are again working on getting the fall garden ready, harvesting all of our produce, up over 600 pounds of produce already donated to the local food banks in the East Campus area. So super excited about that, about how well our garden has done, considering it went in about the 1st of June. So lots of tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, all of those are really still going strong. We have a lot of our cover crops going in. We're adding some of that compost that we've been making in our compost bins as we pull out some of the plants that just really aren't doing very well. We're also really enjoying the fall flowers throughout the garden. Remember when we talk about our rain garden and how spectacular that is in the fall? Well, it is at peak season right now. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and check it out.
Right now it's time to ride lightning, so let's go, John. Are you ready?
Sure, why not?
Burchard, Nebraska, best time to prune the roses.
I would wait until they're dormant, and probably wait until spring.
Perfect. This viewer from Hebron wants to save the seeds of their vegetables. Will they produce the same vegetable?
If they're heirloom varieties, if they're hybrids, they'll be the same vegetable, but a different type maybe.
All right. This is a Norfolk viewer. How late can leafy greens be planted in the fall in small, sort of cloche-covered gardens?
Some of the fast-growing stuff you might still be able to sneak in, especially if you're protecting it, but a lot of the stuff, it's getting a little too late to start.
All right. An Atkinson viewer wants to know about planting and harvesting softneck garlic. When do you do that?
So you plant garlic this time of year. You have until about mid to late October. You'll harvest it May to July next year.
All right. Gearing viewer wants to know whether she should add fertilizer to her compost pile.
No.
So we have another viewer who says they've thrown their pumpkins and their gourds in their compost pile, but then they get this mushy, squashy thing. Is it a bad idea to throw pumpkins in there?
I mean, it's not, but it's going to be a mushy, squashy thing.
Okay. All right, are you ready, Kyle?
Of course.
This is a viewer who wants to know whether the dead needles and the dead branches in older pines should be cleaned up before you treat for those pine diseases.
It's not a bad idea, but it's not necessary. The fungicide should be able to take care of those on the ground too.
All right, and then the people with that issue also are saying, when do you treat for those needle diseases?
So that's typically in the spring when those needles are about half expanded, and then again when those needles have fully expanded.
All right, speaking of shrooms, this is a Lincoln viewer who said they found great big round white ones emerging overnight. What are those?
Probably a common parasol.
All right. We have a Wayne viewer who had scabby peaches, but they were still tasty. What might that be?
Peach scab.
Creative.
It's the truth.
We have a Fremont viewer who said they had smut on their sweet corn and wonders if they can plant it in the same place next year.
Yeah, you can. You can even eat that smut. I did last year on the show. It's tasty.
All right. Is there any fall application you can do on roses to control black spot?
I'm not aware of any. I think the best thing to controlling black spot would be to clean them up via pruning.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. All right, Jody, you ready?
No, there's like a million bugs.
We didn't get a million questions, so you're golden.
Okay.
All right, a Plattsmouth viewer wants to know whether he should use milky spore to control Japanese beetle grubs in his little vineyard.
I mean, you can, but I wouldn't have high expectations.
All right, if one was to use milky spore, when would one do it?
I would find it and read the label. Yeah, university trials, not so successful.
All right. We have a viewer who wonders whether the itch mites are active this year, or did they skip us?
I think they skipped us. We usually rely on a lot of different reports, and we haven't seen any, and no one brought any samples in to look under the microscope.
All right. We have a Waverly viewer who says the Asian jumping worms are annihilating his garden soil, and mulch doesn't seem to do any good. What controls them?
At this time, there's not anything that we can do to control them, so you can pick them out and destroy them.
All right. This viewer thinks they missed the magnolia scale window. Is there anything they can spray on the magnolias now?
Not at this time, but they could probably do a dormant oil before bud break.
All right. Excellent. Nice job, all. Okay, John, plant of the week.
Oh yeah, I'm falling asleep over here. There we go. There's the plant of the week.
Okay.
Look,
It's pretty, isn't it?
it's pretty. We'll move on. Oh no. So we have 2 plants of the week. So this darker pink down here at the bottom, that is Lespedeza, or Gibraltar bush clover. It makes a great big fountain of beautiful plant. You can cut it back in the spring, full sun to light shade. And then this lighter pink one here, very interesting. That is called obedient plant. Why is it called obedient plant? It's because all of the flowers line up in order, and they're very obedient. They behave themselves. It forms clumps, colonies, and it does sun to part shade.
Excellent. And both of those are at our backyard farmer garden.
Yes.
All right. Jody, questions for you. The first one here is, what is happening to this patio plant? What is it? She doesn't see anything.
The leaf cutter bees are using that for nesting material.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. The second one here is, how do I get rid of the leaf cutter beetles on the roses? And he says there's also leaf cutter ants. He's tried 7 and sprays and...
Yeah, we don't normally have leaf cutter ants doing this. It's the leaf cutter bees that are doing this, and usually people are excited about it. If you don't want them, there's not really an insecticide that you would want to use. You can cover those plants, or you can discourage nesting in those pithy stems by either putting white glue after you prune them, or like a thumbtack, or just removing like elderberry and like raspberry. Anytime that there's like pithy stems that they can nest in, you'll want to remove that if you don't want them in your yard.
All right. Then we have a Bellevue viewer who sent us a great picture of a dive bomber.
Okay, so this is cool. This is a giant robber fly, so it's a predatory fly, and they prey on bees and wasps.
All right. Then we have a Bellevue viewer found it deceased on the patio. What is it? And she wonders whether its relatives are coming to its funeral to sting her.
No, so this is a solitary wasp called a cow killer ant. Doesn't really make any sense. It's a type of velvet ant. They're called that because evidently they are very painful stings, and so I'm glad this one didn't sting you. No relatives, solitary.
All right, excellent. Kyle, this is a viewer with a viburnum showing kind of some pretty significant issues on the foliage. What is going on with this?
I have no idea. I spent quite a while today looking at it. Was wondering potentially maybe some sort of virus could cause symptoms like that. The other thing I was wondering about is if we're dealing with some sort of salt burn or something like that with that marginal necrosis. Really don't know, but if you'd like to send a sample into the diagnostic clinic, we are open, so go ahead and send one in.
Yes, you are open, thank heavens. This is a Ponca Hills, Omaha area, not Ponca. They have dogwood about 3 years old. What's up with this? So both the plant itself and then the foliage.
Yeah, so I kind of wonder if it's not kind of like John was talking earlier, just kind of the weather that we're having. And this isn't some early fall coloration that's occurring. There are some leaf spot diseases that will affect dogwoods, but I don't think that we're dealing with that here. So keep an eye on it. It's probably going to be just fine.
I think it's drought.
Yep.
Yeah, that's classic on dogwood. All right, John, your next one. This is an Omaha viewer with a summer blooming clematis, and this is Omaha. Wondering if it's okay to cut this back to get rid of all that dead foliage. It just bloomed about 3 to 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, you could do that. Go ahead and cut it back. I think things are just closing down early this year, and so go ahead and prune it back.
All right. Your next one, we got this from 3 different viewers, actually, this same week. This one's a Garland viewer. About 55-year-old lilacs, big row. They had small flowers. They thought, the frost had gotten them. Cut off all the dead branches for the first time ever. They don't cut them back. Leaves curled, turned black, came back out, grew back up, went out. We have lilacs. What is going on?
So this is I think a weather. So these plants are, we would maybe say they're confused. We had that early frost, so it killed the leaves and maybe only stunted the flowers, or it redeveloped some buds. Who knows what the cause was? But it's just basically weather. Our weather is getting so different and unpredictable that even the plants don't know what's going on. So it's just call it 2020 and move on.
And then we have a Clarkson viewer with Aronia. Only 2, they both produced fruit, but only about 3 of the branches were dead, and now it looks like, we've got the foliage going on, and then this. So what do we think is happening here?
So it looks like there could be some canker at the base of that. Whenever you see that dark coloration and those splits and those inclusions. So I think we have some canker going on there. So I think that'll be a soon to be, formerly known as Aronia berry.
Right. They can be cut back.
Yeah, they can be cut
maybe.
back, so you might be able to.
Right.
Depends on how far down that goes.
Exactly. Thanks, all. Well, as cooler weather moves in on us, our containers are really starting to decline. You could just clean them up and store them for next year. Terry James, who is the container queen, has a few ideas that you can use to keep those containers a focal point around your home.
Season we talked about containers and really how to put them together. It gave you all those tips and tricks of soil, fertilizer, kind of some design ideas. So it's been since May since we talked about it. You've enjoyed your containers all summer long. And now we're moving into fall, and you don't have to put those containers away. You can actually continue to use them. One of the things that you really want to look at is how your plants look. So one of my containers right now is looking pretty sad. Not any flowers really on it anymore, just a lot of green, kind of sad. So what I want to do is I want to take this container and I want to move it into fall. Remember, one of the tips I gave you was to use grasses. Well, unfortunately, I didn't use any grasses in this one, but if you did have grasses, then you would leave those in. But you want to remove all of these, and then you're going to add some of those fall elements. You're going to add maybe some chrysanthemums. You can also find some asters that are available in the store. One of the other things that you can use is you can use some fake foliage. So some of these colorful leaves are really great to add in those containers. You can also find some sticks or some twigs that you've been kind of pruning throughout the summer, and you can add those for some height and some dimension in your container also. You can also take those twigs and you can spray paint them with a little bit of spray paint, or if you're really thinking about it and moving from fall into winter, you can go get some of that kind of fake snow and spray and make that colorful also. You can also add some fall components as some little people or sticks or pumpkins or straw bales. So remember we talked about all the great things about containers. Well, don't in containers just in the summer. Move them into the fall and really even move them into winter. So enjoy your containers for the whole season long.
That's the great thing about containers. They can be almost anything you want, including putting little people in them.
It's like little people, fake plants. What's going on here?
Yeah, so try that creativity and have a little bit of fun with it. We'll see what we get for calls on that one. Jody, this is a viewer who has a spruce that have these, and they're wondering when they should treat them, and what is it?
Okay, I wish I saw more of what's going on with this spruce. I'm assuming it's that little brown thing there.
On the tips of the branches.
Yeah, and so we did have a lot of spruce needle miner. So if it's got webbing and they look like brown needles like piled on top of each other, that is what you might have. If you want to treat for this, it's going to be next year, spring, when you start seeing that. Take a hose and spray all those needles off. They're pretty loosely piled on there. And then you can treat with a carbaryl to kill the caterpillars.
All right. This is an Omaha viewer who has a 55-year-old silver maple showing these, which we usually have earlier in the season.
Yeah.
So what do we do?
Nothing. So these are galls. These are maple bladder galls that occur because of a urifide mite feeds on it, and then the plant reacts by putting tissue over top of it, which protects it. And so insecticide's not going to work because it's too late by the time you see these. And it's variable, like whether it hits some trees or parts of the trees. If it's super ugly and there's a few of them, you can prune them off, but there's not really anything control-wise. It looks bad, but it's not harmful or going to kill the tree.
All right. Then we have a Snyder viewer who said this linden has bugs. What is it?
It's almost the same thing, but it's linden finger gall because they look like fingers. So not anything you can do about it. So creative. They could be spindle gall or finger gall, and the other one was bladder gall because it looks like a pouch.
Yeah, same thing on linden.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jody. Speaking of maples, Autumn Blaze is blazing away, looking like this, leaves all over the tree, doing this, which I think is our second picture, turning red already. What is up with Autumn Blaze?
Yeah, well, and I think this one has some additional things going on. It was, I want to say, there was a fairly recent planting and new construction. So I think the main problem here is just transplant stress. It can be very stressful for trees to go from their nice, cozy pot containers into the lawn, and it can take a few years for them to fully establish and do what they want to do. I wouldn't do anything for this aside from maybe just making sure that it does have adequate water going into the winter.
All right, Kyle, we have some big ones that are established in Lincoln doing the same thing. Is it still environmental stress?
Yeah, it's most likely environmental stress. As we've talked a few times, it's been a weird year for weather. Between the freezes and the heat and the winds, it's been rough on a lot of our old trees.
All right. Then you have another one, which is Omaha, strange fungus question.
Yeah, this is a nice, beautiful stinkhorn. And so I think last week we had some eggs, and this is what comes out of the eggs. Typically, they'll only last for a day or two. And then that brown kind of slimy stuff part up top, that's going to be those are the spores, and that's where they get their name, the stinkhorn. It does have an odor that will attract some flies and other insects that can go and disperse those spores. Not poisonous or anything like that, so really nothing to worry about with these stinkhorns.
All right, and Kyle, you have another one, was actually the leaf cutter beetle person, but there's something else going on with these roses. What is that?
I was almost wondering about, because there were some kind of blacker spots on there, and I was wondering if it isn't black spot of rose. And the other thing with those, that lighter coloration, we could maybe be dealing with some iron chlorosis too.
Okay, so neither of those correctable?
Not yet, nothing to do right now. So just your typical fall rose cleanup, and then next year, hopefully things will come back better.
All right, excellent, thank you, Kyle. All right, you have just a couple that are relatively easy and quick, kind of, sorta, John. The first is Central City, a mysterious plant growing in the garden. It appears to be some kind of a thistle, growing about 6 feet from the bird feeder. What is this?
Okay, well, let's play Sherlock Holmes. So there's several clues in there. Mysterious plant near the bird feeder. There we go. So
In the candlestick with her, in
Right,
the closet
yes.
with a candlestick.
so this is not a thistle. This is safflower. And safflower is a common ingredient in birdseed. So there, we've solved the case, Sherlock. It is a safflower.
And it, annual, perennial, what do they do to control it if they don't want it?
Don't feed the birds.
And if they want the birds,
You can just, pick them when they're small. It's, yeah, just
pick. Pick and pluck.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Your next one is another ID. This is a viewer who has this on an acreage northwest of Lincoln. It was identified as tall Joe Pye, but that's not it. It's in both the brome and the native grassland. So it's the white one here. Dozens of the clumps. What is it? And if it should be eradicated, how does a person do that on 5 acres worth? They don't want to use glyphosate that kills everything. Yeah.
So this is actually not a Joe Pye weed.
Right.
This is actually a native plant. This is white snake root. So it is a, quote, wildflower. So parts of it, it is poisonous. So if you have kids, pets, etc., you want to watch out for that. Controlling it on an acreage, you're going to have to use some sort of herbicide treatment on that. You could do something more selective, like 2,4-D or something like that. Glyphosate will do it, but it'll kill everything. But you'll have to do a selective broadleaf herbicide.
Right. Prolific seed producer.
Yes. So it'll be several years. Even if you get it controlled, you'll have to do that several years in a row.
Excellent. Okay, thank you all. Well, we are down to really just one announcement this week, but it's still a fun one. Our Grow Big Red virtual learning series is continuing. Composting is our next one. You can register at go.unl.edu/growbigredvirtual Tuesdays through September. And John and all of you have been on this, and it's really been pretty successful so
Yes,
far.
Jody and I have been there every week, and so we have 2 more weeks to go, and then we get to take a nap.
Or not.
Or not.
We start into the next season,
Yes.
right? All right, Jody, we have time for a question or two here.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one is that we've now gone from that hot to wet to cold. Should people expect the mosquito season to be finished, or do they still need to be concerned about mosquitoes and ticks and all that good stuff?
They should still be concerned.
And do what?
Dump standing water, wear repellents, check for ticks, check all your crevices, check your pets, make sure your pets are still treated.
Ticks in particular.
Definitely for
Yeah.
ticks. We do have the black-legged tick established in Nebraska in some places, and it is active October to May. So
All right.
keep that in mind.
Excellent. Thanks. Kyle, we have people who want to know whether they've put some soil into their compost pile that they think had some Phytophthora or something in it. Should they try to get that incorporated into the compost, or should they dig that out?
Anytime we're talking about disease material in compost, the question I always want to ask is, how are you composting? Because if you are properly composting, meaning that you're using a temperature probe to make sure that the very center of it reaches 160 degrees Fahrenheit, flipping it at least 3 times per season, making sure that the center is reaching temperature each time you flip it, then that should take care of any pathogens, Phytophthora included. However, if you're like most people who have a backyard compost pile where it just really sits, maybe it gets turned once per season, but there's no temperature checks, I would try to pull it out. Really won't want to be putting disease material in those less managed compost piles.